Hello, my astrology friends. This is Lada from Astrolada.com, and today my guest is the astrologer from UK, Philip. Hello, Philip. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's a little broken, but I'm sure we're present. It was working smoothly, and now we're back. It was just a
Okay.
bump over the road.
Okay, so I'm here today with Philip, and we haven't seen him for a while, and his mind is brilliant, very, very penetrating astrologer. And we're going to be talking about the current Saturn sextile Jupiter, the opening sextile of the Saturn Jupiter cycle. So I'm very curious to hear what you can tell us about that. Your insights are always very deep. And before we proceed, I want just to announce to people that Philip is doing a lovely promotion for those who would like to have a reading with him. Extensive answer to one question, live 30 minutes with him. He prefers to do live readings with you rather than recorded. Or his full live horoscope, which is an hour and a bit more, will be $299 instead of $350 for those of you viewers of Astrolada for the next couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to hear your brilliant insight, Phil.
Well, thank you so much for holding the space and allowing me to share with you and your audience, Lada. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. What a jolly exciting time we do find ourselves here within. We're actually talking about getting longevity in a new world form, right? With Saturn in Pisces, I see it's like we've got the old world order, the old white traditions going out with one fish being devolutionary scale, and the other fish is the new ones coming in. Maybe not so. It might not be that it's tried and tested. These new formats, these new ways of doing things. For instance, this new technology, Chat GPT, an example like that. We're not quite sure what that thing's role might be, or even something like holistic gardening and things like this. Other traditionalists might not see the benefactor and the longevity in that yet, but these are evolving things that we would like to support and sustain us. Maybe even we might be building a business in general, or we might have a new family, and we would like that to support and sustain us. And so whatever had been there previously propping us up might not be as sustainable as we might put the value into. So that might be on its way out. These are like Saturn and Pisces scenarios.
I love how
But
you describe, because a lot of people say, oh, Pisces, so peaceful, so lovely, but there is an internal battle there. The two fishes are swimming in different directions. One is towards the past, one is towards the future. And that's, you're very right. I've noticed that transit through the 12th house or through Pisces is when the biggest internal battle happens. And that's why people feel so stuck at moments when the Pisces is activated and so contradictory inside.
yeah, and we can get so set in our ways that we think that there's no other way out with Pisces because the fog is right before our eyes. And like, where is the way out? And the way out is just right there in front of us, but we can't see it always. However, we feel our way through it with Pisces sometimes, and it can be that actually, if we can just surrender and accept where we feel guided, then sometimes that's going to give us the impetus and the courage to move through what might be an unclear situation. And it really builds trust in ourselves as well. But also, when we learn to take actions and support ourselves, Saturn stuff, in a way which is progressive, we can find that reassurance comes from within, and taking definite procedures to bring that to us so that we know we've taken the first step, I find. And so the thing is, Saturn is much more favorable in Aquarius, where it was the past 3 years, or in Capricorn, where it was 3 years before that. And it was actually that Saturn met with Jupiter at 0 degrees of Aquarius at the very end of 2020, which is why all that baloney happened beforehand. And so we find that actually we were having a grand opportunity with the seeding of this new cycle, but we don't hear so much about that in the astrological world now. But so what happened after the Great Conjunction? Well, we kept living our lives. We might have actually put ourselves into community in a way which is pretty good and sustainable. And now we feel supported as well as a fixture within those communities where we have established ourselves. That's with Saturn in Aquarius. And Jupiter also gave us a lot of work with that and opportunities to broaden our horizons. But then Jupiter went into Pisces. It even went flying through there, went through Aries. That was quick as well. And now Jupiter is in Taurus. So we've gone through the fog, we've gone through the rebirth situation. Now we're looking how to sustain our value in the philosophy, letting go maybe of a limiting belief system and actually cultivating sustainable trust and accountability, faith, if you will, which is beyond a hope or maybe it's a I've got this, you've got this. This is actually going to be with us, and we don't have to go back and work on it because it's actually a keystone, if you will. It's holding us together, and that's what the second sign always does. It's a succeedent place which props up what come before it. And so now we're actually with both Saturn and Jupiter retrograde, and they're farther than what you would say is 60 degrees apart, because it was earlier this year. I would say maybe around May, June, just after Saturn station retrograde. We're talking June. And so it was actually that they come into a 60-degree sextile at that point. And this is at 7 degrees of Taurus, fixed Earth, and Pisces, mutable water. So Saturn's wanting to go backwards and Jupiter's still pushing forward for a few more months. It was only September the 7th that Jupiter stationed retrograde, which is a month ago now. And that was at 15 degrees of Taurus. Very interesting thing to note, sub-note for us astrological nerds. Jupiter's retrograde in Taurus this year goes from 15 degrees, we'll look at it on the screen in just a minute, back to 5 degrees of Taurus, which is where it will station direct on December the 29th, 30th this year. So we've still got a lot, most of Jupiter retrograde to go. It's only just picking up the pace. But these are the exact same degrees that Mercury retrogressed back in April and May in Taurus. And this is an astrological anomaly I'd like to ask you about, Lada, because I went back into the 80s and all the way forward for another 60 years. And I can't see any other situation where Jupiter traced the exact degrees of a Mercury retrograde. In fact, it's hard to find them do it in the same sign in the same year. They're going to do it in Cancer in a couple of years. They even do it in Libra a few years after that, and then Sagittarius, but not on the same degrees or even at the same. They're not even in the same sign at the same time either. Have you ever seen this take place in such a profound way?
I never paid attention to that, to this bigger patterns, but it would seem to me like there is something very deep to be reworked and intuitively through Jupiter and on intellectual analytical level through Mercury. That's why it continues. Obviously, Mercury kickstarted it, and now Jupiter will continue it. So maybe first something happened when Mercury was retrograde there. Was it April and May, you said? I forgot already. Now
Yes.
that first came to us maybe more like in our mind and in our mundane environment, while now Jupiter is retrograding days, activating the high understanding of those processes. That at least that's how I would interpret it.
I love that for sure, especially as you say, this is the Mercury is the lower mind. It rules Gemini and Virgo, the mutable signs.
And more
Whereas
mundane events, more like kind of more material outside events or just our mind thinking, well, Jupiter is like, okay, how do I make sense of this now to a higher mind?
Yeah, what's the wisdom behind that, and how can we find basically a maturity that we're actually maybe living within the trust rather than playing or practicing with an old way that we knew wasn't going to work, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I also got another analogy before we move on. It's a bit like lacing our shoes with and then or unlacing them where all the knots are. We haven't done them up properly for a while. I don't know if we're talking just for me, but sometimes it can get like that. But then when you've got the time to really put in these new laces with Jupiter and really take your time about knowing that you've got it all sorted, running smoothly. So the thing is, it echoes this sextile. with Saturn actually having been retrograde and Jupiter being direct, it's not a fully functioning sextile, if you will. Like, it's not optimum. And so the fact that Jupiter now gets to because that was happening around the same time as this Mercury retrograde. So Mercury's flown by. It's going to continue its earthy retrograde. The next one's in Capricorn, in Sagittarius, not for a while yet. It's just finished its retrograde shadow in Virgo. The point is, Jupiter is going to be retracing these steps all the way into March, into April, before it gets out of shadow. And so let's put that on the shelf. So Saturn is retrograde now, and it's going to continue to be retrograde until November, early November. And it stations direct about 6 weeks before Jupiter. Saturn moving more slowly, always, than Jupiter. It's going to be more gradual when it picks up the pace, but it's got a 6-week head start from 0 degrees of Pisces, which is where it was back in February this year, to move forward. And yet Jupiter will station direct, as we said, at the very end of December at 5 degrees. So Jupiter gets a few degrees head start, but Saturn will pick up the pace, and then they linger in sextile. And this is what we're going to share on the screen, as well as the other transits that go in between, because this lingering sextile is very beautiful, a gift, if you will, because it's as all planets stationed direct, Uranus and the Sun and Pluto moving into Aquarius, that we have Saturn and Jupiter traveling together for about 6 weeks in a sextile, which is profound. I feel like this is really the trophy cabinet opening. But what trophies do we get to put on in the cabinet? Well, that's what we're cultivating now. You could say we're granted the time and the space to work on our trades, on our projects, on our self-worth and our value, Taurus, in a way which is re-envisioning and reimagining how they can support us. And these might be slightly out-the-box ideas. They might be slightly pioneering ideas. They might be about finding something that's futuristic and reworking it in a way that allows us to find stability in a world which is ever-changing and maybe we felt wasn't supporting us prior to that. How do you feel about this opening sextile from Saturn and Jupiter, and how important it is? Because it's not just a 60-degree sextile that lasts for a few weeks. This is the opening sextile, like a crescent of a moon, from a cycle which lasts us 20 years.
So when is it exactly? I want to first hear. When is that few weeks that they're like moving at 60-degree sextile?
It's at the very end of January 2024, pretty much all the way through February into those earlier weeks of March.
Okay.
And so we'll look at it on the screen. I'll show you. But that's quite a nice little period there.
Yeah, well, at the same time, Pluto will enter Aquarius again, as you said. And last time Pluto entered Aquarius was in March this year. And that's when banks started dropping like flies. Some of the biggest banks in Europe and in the States collapsed. So there might be something similar happening, but the Jupiter-Saturn sextile might be able to hold the situation somehow and people not to lose their minds, or to be able, because Jupiter and Saturn, they define the society as well. Before Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, we only judged about social developments in the world, cultural, historical, the big events by the Saturn-Jupiter cycle. So I believe that Pluto now entering Aquarius corresponding to the Saturn-Jupiter sextile, maybe the economy will be able to hold and people will be able to have more opportunity, even if there is some serious financial changes happening with Pluto in Aquarius, or even with the introduction of digital stuff and whatever. Plus, I think those new things that are happening will be accepted a bit more easily and integrated with more ease in society in some way.
Well, it makes for an interesting debate astrologically in general, if we even just put in the aspect aside per se. An energetic opportunity. And we've seen what happens before with them coming around, that we can thrive with such energy, as can anybody, as like who has a plan. And so there could be many distractions at this time that puts us away from our focal point. And one of the things in general spirituality I've really come into awareness of is our focus is key. Where we're putting our attention is going to be developing. It's like I feel that if you got the term green fingered, like for when you're in the garden and you if you're really good at gardening, whether it grows. That's the same for our focus. So if we're focusing on health, if we're focusing on learning or studying something, or if we're focusing on our stresses, which sometimes we do, of course, and sometimes they can be overbearing to the point that that becomes like a reoccurring Groundhog Day challenge. So we really need to place our focus on the things that we are able to develop ourselves.
And you're
And so
saying that this period will help us really build something that might be in our life for many years ahead to make
well, if we're focused
solid.
on that, like if we're focused on a day-to-day ritual and routine, which is going to be of passion for us, gets us out of the bed in the morning with excitement and zeal, and maybe even moving beyond any challenges, because we've got the courage to see that we're good enough to do things that we might have limited ourselves to. For instance, this Venus retrograde is really, it's a bit like a stretching our capacity to express our own value, I feel like, and even our voice. We might have not vouched for ourselves and said, hey, I'm really good at what I've been doing. I've been practicing astrologer for 16 years. That's me vouching for myself. And sometimes if we don't vouch for ourselves, people don't know the credence and the brilliance for what we've got. But there's loads of people who are great at loads of things who don't speak up. I mean, something that we learn along our journey about having to do so. And when we do, we get more of what we are about in the world. And so it's a bit like marketing ourselves, or even the frequency we have about ourselves. So Taurus is the throat chakra, and Jupiter is the great benefic. This is about really sharing our voice and our value in the most tremendous of ways, with a lot of philosophy behind it, a lot of backing behind it, in a way which can grow in a very supportive manner. This is a great opportunity to see that we don't have to keep going back and working with these energies, because Jupiter's going to fly actually after this sextile, meet with Uranus, which happens every 13 years, and it brings a lot of unexpected waves. For instance, the last waves, you were surfing it, Lada, and it was the YouTube wave.
Oh yeah, it was in Aries, so I caught the wave.
You were a pioneer, right? And so you still are, like it takes courage to surf a wave and to jump on it. You don't know where it's going potentially, but yeah, actually it took you to the opportunity to really find that it provided for you because you had the impetus to get on it early, right? And so this was also with all social media in general. The iPhone and all of these tablet phones, they weren't around before that last conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus. And so we're not quite sure what can spring from this at this stage, the likes of potential travel.
Currency. Well, it's in Taurus, new money, new currency, new products for consumption, all of something with the earth, I believe, as well. But it will be something also digital, because in these times, it's something digital in some.
Like the digital passports, or and even how we choose to share our voice in different ways, and our skills and our trades. Like, for instance, they might even say they can put different taxes on different things, but that's what people who want to go with that energy. There's also new opportunities to share alternative ways of making money, like haven't been done before.
I like this. Yeah, very different ways that never existed.
But by this time next year, Jupiter's all the way in Gemini, and so it's completely different world. This is a short window of time that we're bursting through, if you will. And so I feel that this progression to get us there is the big escalator. It's the big building board. It's the thing that we've got time to make the most of in this period. And so that for business is great. That even for planning our family, or where we might want to live, or where we're cultivating our lives. This is fantastic information, which I'm able to share with people in their readings if they choose to book one. That's what I'm doing. That's what all people are asking me. When's this going to be opening up for us for this type of thing? However, we always have interest in our interpersonal relationships as well. And so with Venus and Mars, this is an interesting story we've got going on, because they've been sextile for about a couple of weeks now in the sky. And Mars is in Venus's sign of Libra. Actually, this week it's going through a couple of challenging aspects. Right now, it's moving into a conjunction with the South Node. This will be here today, gone tomorrow by this week, because Mars will make a challenging cardinal square with Pluto as Pluto's stationing direct. This is the more challenging moment, but it's a break-free moment. And Venus is sextile Mars, and so there's a receptivity, there's a compassionate opening.
When
There's
is
this
that? This is
value
happening now in October? Yeah.
That's happening this week. It's happening right now. Venus is at slightly higher degree, but hasn't got to its optimum pace yet. And so Venus is speeding up, and they're traveling together at this sextile, a bit like how Jupiter and Saturn are going to do it in January into February. But the thing is, we're closing out this cycle between Mars and Venus. They're going to meet in, I think it's April. I looked at the date yesterday. It's actually in Aquarius. Actually, I got the date now. It's February the 22nd. And so they meet at 7 degrees of Aquarius, and it's in a conjunction with Pluto, because Pluto would have been in new territory in Aquarius it hadn't been in for 248 years. And so I see that maybe because Mars is basically also being gobbled up by the beams of the sun. You can't see Mars for much longer. It's being obscured by the brightness of the Libra sun, and they're going to travel together and make a conjunction towards the end of Scorpio. And Mars won't be re-immersing itself from beneath the beams until we're moving towards the solstice in Sagittarius, which is great that Mars meets with the sun in its home sign in Scorpio. But it's a bit of a journey. This is going to take us, a couple of months to get through this. The point is that it brings up a lot about our subconscious identifications. I mean, personally, I'm not talking about the world. There could be all kinds of things going on in the world with that energy. But the point is, for us as individuals, we're looking at our quality of leadership. We're looking at our quality of discernment with regards to how we lead ourselves, or we put other idols as leaders in the world, you could say. And so this is very important for our self-worth and value, because sometimes we put others on pedestals above us, or we put ourselves in diminishing divots beneath, which is beneath us. But we're all equal, really. So my point about this is Mars and Venus met in Aquarius 18 months ago. They're going to be meeting again in 6 months. They have this sextile right now, which is allowing us to release old devaluating identifications that weren't for us, and include our sense of brilliance, our sense of sustainable worthiness into the template while Pluto stations direct. So it's a self-empowering moment for us now. But by the time that Venus catches up with Mars, after they travel together for a little bit, this is a cycle where maybe we can find that we've optimized our sense of self-worth within community, and how we do relationships, who we relate to, how we go about it, whether it's a government, whether it's a corporation, whether it's our children, our family, maybe it's the people in our constituencies and networks, or maybe it's our lovers. We're looking at an alternative way to recognize how we can open up and be more transparent with who we are and with what we're about in our lives and experiences.
Well, the last time Venus and Mars met with Pluto was when the war in Ukraine and Russia exploded. So I hope will be the end of that cycle when they meet again now.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Wasn't Pluto still at the very end of Capricorn? It was an out of sign conjunction.
Yeah, there were 0 Aquarius and Pluto was like 29 or something.
So you're very correct. So they were actually more close. Mars and Pluto conjunction was more close to Pluto that time than it will be this time. But they're going to be this time in the same sign. I think Pluto's still at 1 or 2 degrees and they're at 7. So there's about a 5-degree orb or something. But still dramatic leaps in the trajectory of how we do relationship. And one of the things that I've noticed through these past few years is a lot of well, this is a very Aquarius thing. There's a lot of just allowing people to get on with it. If they want to be different, just let them do their thing. They're fine. We don't have to try and tear them down. they're doing their thing and I'm doing my thing, and that's okay.
It's very Aquarian, yeah.
I see more of that coming for
I
us.
hope it's not too much digitalization of relationships, because Aquarius is, or maybe Aquarius is also more asexual sign, like, or unisexual sign as well. In that
Yeah, well,
they're
it can
meeting
be
again
quite
in Aquarius, yeah.
isolating, isn't it? Or isolating what it is to do relationship. You know, sometimes it can be, we get out of practice, don't we? And we can find that actually we haven't gone and done this, that, or the other, and we forget how social the adept we can be in other situations than others. Uh, so those are one of the things we could have. But also, as you say, the blending of genders is something which has even been a bit of a regime in certain circles, you could say, for quite some decades. So I feel like it's for us to really lead with our expression, which is under with Pluto in Aquarius. That's like the evolutionary point, isn't it? The polarity point of Pluto. That's the bit that's kind of under siege for humanity, and that's Leo for the next 20 years. Our heart's expression. So our practice is, how do we express our hearts more than ever? And the funny thing is about that, we just had a Venus retrograde in Leo event, not too distant few years from now. We're going to have Pluto opposite Jupiter in Leo. That's obviously a little while off yet, but it's going to be about what we believe about our, we're able or allowed or permitted to express about our heart. So I feel like this is something we want to keep up as a roaring trade. We want to keep this going like a burning furnace within ourselves, right? And we don't want to have it diminished whatsoever.
Yeah, sometimes I love Aquarius's energy. It's high vibration, but it's like Aquarius Leo is like the battle between the head and the heart, because Aquarius is more the head, Leo is the heart. But sometimes Aquarius can become a bit immoral, because the mind, the brain can explain everything. You can explain one point of view with facts and another point of view with facts. So I just hope, like with this Mars, Venus, Pluto conjunction there that's happening, that people can go to extremes where they can, you know, give excuse to everything, where through a logical, through mind perspective, through, there is this, the dangerous side of it. But the positive side, I believe, relationships, people will start relating more and more based on mutual ideals, which is very much Aquarius. Even relationships will not be so much only about sexual attraction for years ahead, because again, it will last for 2-3 years, but it will be much more about having like-minded ideals, mutual goals, because these are the energies of Aquarius. What can we create together in a goal? Or do we have similar altruistic ideas about the world? Or maybe just people giving priority to friendships, not necessarily always looking for the excitable side of relationship, more the constructive one. This is, let's say, higher vibration of Aquarius, where what can we do for the world? How can we achieve our goals together? Rather than just this dizzy woozy feeling of being in love. I'm not saying everyone in the world will not feel in love, but we might see such trends, which they're starting already. It's been Venus Mars conjunction in Aquarius for the last 2 years almost already.
It's interesting, isn't it? See, putting aside our differences so that we can work towards a common goal, but yet there's also this push for individualization as well. So it's they're opposites that pull together. It's a funny thing, isn't it? The
And giving more
development of
freedom
consciousness.
in our relationships. That's the only way to go forward. Like, I cannot ask you to be someone else, or to shape or to change according to my ideas. And more relationships will be breaking up. The Aquarius is a sign of breakup, divorce as well. So there is this trend that will carry as well, unless
Well,
people give
one
each
of the
other, like recognize each other as individuals and as you know, this Aquarian higher qualities.
well, Pluto is a pressure, isn't it? And so there's a pressure and there's a brittleness to that Aquarius, as you say, that it can break like that. But the irony is sometimes that can bring it's like a melting pot in itself, isn't it? Because I feel like we want to relate, we want to have closeness, we want to have communion, but at the same time, as we there's no ownership or possession in Aquarius. It's like I'm sharing. Um, and so, but the thing is, at the same time, that brings out heartache as well, because we've got emotions where we want to, there's this weird things where we want to have our, well, I'm seen, I'm the special one, or I like to give my energy to someone so they feel special. But at the
Yeah.
same time, there's this allowing and acceptance that I might make them feel special in this way, but they can be made feel special in this other situation in another way. It's just like having different tastes of music, which we enjoy. We can't just expect us to listen to one all the time. And so that's a challenge which we might be moving through. And some people might go one way all to one extreme, and some people might go one way to another extreme. And there might be a few of us milling around, figuring it out in the middle as well.
Yeah, it will be interesting. We already have a feeling of this. There's so many Aquarius energies since 2020 when Jupiter and Saturn joined in Aquarius. We're seeing how Aquarius is the future, the new technologies. Also, relationships are mostly happening through the internet, dating nowadays, or another way. And it will continue because Venus and Mars, the planets of relationship, met last time in Aquarius, now again in Aquarius for another 2-year cycle. So if you're not the type of digital romancer, it can be go to, if you want to have more success to meeting a partner over the next 2 years as well and further, go to lectures where many people gather together, like-minded conferences. Or if you're the online person, definitely that's the place for many, but like-minded concerts, seminars, such kind of stuff where people of similar ideals get together for, especially with similar social understanding where society is going. Anyway, but that's
This is one of the things that I love about the way that you share transits, Lada, because we look at a chart and we think, okay, I can alchemize this natal chart. For instance, like on my chart, everything's on the bottom and all very hidden. And so sometimes, in a sense, to work with that can be beneficial. Example, I might choose to produce a piece of material where you can't see my face and communicate the wisdom from that perspective. And that's playing to my advantage because it's playing to my nature in the chart. When you're talking about, it could be all online, you might be fixated to be online. It was like, no, just get into a group, get into a community, get to the farmers market, get to a yoga class, you'll meet people there.
Exactly. These are Aquarius activities for social life. Mars and Venus is your social life, and that's the way to go. And there is a bit of Aquarius it's planned as well. There is some also, when you get group togethers, it's planned like a yoga group or whatever. But there is also this Uranian quality of Aquarius, which is very sudden and unexpected. So I don't know, it can go both ways, whether Uranus or Saturnian energy, it can work with both ways, whether you plan those activities. So I'm going to go to, this Friday on yoga, Saturday, this seminar, whatever, or whether it's you just spontaneously find yourself somewhere at some, street dance.
That's the benefit of it. That I was actually I returned back to the UK. I've been living in Mexico for the past 3 years, and I was on the bus the other day, and because I'm like situated in this village, and this village is very isolated. But on the bus, I was daydreaming. Everyone's going to town, which is Mercury, right? The marketplace, and that's where things can change. Things aren't changing in the isolation of the village, but when you go to the hustle, who knows what we might come back with, who we may meet, and all these different things, because it provides the opportunity for the mutable shifts in our lives that we need. So when we go home, it's not the same as it was when we left.
So that's very Aquarius is where more people go, even though, they don't have to be just the big city. It can be people just like festivals or whatever, where you have more people of your blood type if you're looking for specific. But it's not going to be enough that you go where lots of people are. That's what I wanted to say, because Aquarius is very much about having ideological. Aquarius is symbolized by a vibration, 2 waves. You have to have and similar vibration. More and more people are attracting each other, not because they work in the same office, but because they have similar vibrations. And that's what people will continue to be attracted to, what we can say, friendship by mutual interest, by mutual ideals, rather than just situational.
Well, this is an interesting allegory for Aquarius energy as well. We spoke about Pisces deeply with the fog and like not sometimes being able to see right in front of your nose. But in a similar way, Aquarius can be like, we're operating here And this is the way that we think that it has to be, and has been done and will be done. But then if we think of that like a maze, and then we found a ladder, and we can just climb this ladder and we can see, oh, I know the way out now. I don't have to keep going around this circle now, doing things this way, because I can see the whole landscape from this higher perspective that allows us to see that we can do it this way, or even this other way, which had never even been considered before. And it was right there the whole time.
You say Aquarius has this energy of elevation. Yeah, it's a high sign where elevates and see. And so, yeah, actually, to move a lot with a lot of personal projects or whatever, again, rather than trying to figure it out on your own only, because Mars and Venus, again, activating Aquarius, they can be the need, maybe share, discuss with others.
And it can be a point of view that is all to our own sometime. It might not be a problem of the world or the community or society. We might thought, for instance, oh, I'm interested in astrology. No one else is. Not around here. Not in this community, because that's the stigma we've had in our mind. Maybe for some jolly good reasoning that was put in our mind, but actually it's obsolete now. That's not actually the truth of the actual situation, other than in our head, because actually there's people on the bus who sat next to us, they've got astrology books. There's people who are running the astrology bookshop down the road, and we just never knew it was there. And all of these other people in the cafe where we're sat there reading our book, and they're gasping to have a conversation about the stuff, but we're not sharing.
It's been incredible already since Mars-Venus cycle started in 2022. It was in Aquarius, and now there will be another one in Aquarius. It's fascinating because everywhere I go now, I'm in Bulgaria, in a small town. It's probably 60,000. I go to my kids' school class. One of the girls is an astrologer. The other one is a spiritual healer. Then I go to a lecture in the park and I meet 5 people that we have mutual goals, and we started working on projects for children and health. And it's like, it's so easy actually, because you carry your vibration with you. And I find those people at the most random places, in the most unexpected places, and I don't feel alone. It's incredible. And I think this trend will carry on. And I vibrate with Aquarius energy already, but I've been noticing it more even with Pluto affected Aquarius for a little bit, and it will be becoming stronger and stronger, this vibrational attraction, even in the most unlikely places, to people of your own blood group, as they call it.
I love what you're sharing there, because it doesn't have to be that we have to save ourselves to geographically put ourselves in a different community in the world, because as you say, we're attracted and drawn to the right people because of our frequency and our blood group and like who we are. And so as long as we're sustaining and holding ourselves in our vision, in our own currency, then the people who are most valuable for us we just synchronistically find each other.
Yeah, you'll be pulled in that direction randomly or whatever. Even the teacher, turned out the teacher of my children, she is very spiritual, and she's into teaching children yoga and breathing. And I'm like, wow. And all the parents there of the few kids were mixed parents from mixed countries. And I'm like, I'm so aligning, attracting like exactly similar experiences, and for years it didn't happen. I felt so isolated, but now it's picking up, and it will become more and more with Pluto in Aquarius for the next 20 years as well. You'll become more and more aware of those things around you, so not to be lonely.
Now this is something that I think everybody and yourself can be in awe of, because for me, I am. So if we remember the sextile from Saturn and Jupiter, that hasn't really even happened yet. We're just talking about it.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen, and we'll be off into this next thing talking about these other aspects. But when we're in a crescent phase of a moon cycle and things are just starting to happen, that's a very magical time, because it's going to go a lot further. There's normally about 4 or 5 days into a lunar cycle out of 29 and a half. Mm-hmm. And so we can consider these happenstance and circumstance, these starting to boils, like it's a bit like a pot that's starting to boil. I'm meeting people at the school and they do astrology and yoga and spirituality. They're teaching it and the kids are open to it. This is just the beginning of maybe relationships which will last for 10, 15 or more years.
Thank you for including the Saturn-Jupiter sextile now into this. It means whatever we're building now up into March, it's going to be long. It's going to open us, as you said, 15, 16 years ahead. And it might not be just relationships. It might be something it's starting exactly. That's going to have, it's opening up long lasting opportunities.
There could be a whole astrological faculty at that school within 5 to 10 years, for all you know, and you might be running it.
You're right.
You never know.
Third graders learning astrology.
Yeah, doing a little bit of art, a little bit of yoga, and a little bit of astrology and music. I think that this is key for opening our hearts and opening our minds. And, you know, it starts with us. And I feel like this can kind of become a trend. So I feel like this is a good thing to be open to.
Oh, it's happening here in my little town when we're children are, it's the parents are taking control and that don't want, they want to introduce the spiritual side. But we can take also this Jupiter sextile Saturn over the next few months, starting a business. Fantastic. You know, it's for relationships, for business, especially for material. If you want to fulfill something material, concrete, because Jupiter gives you the opportunity, even the resources from Taurus, the right resources, to find them intuitively, to attract them, while Saturn sextile can allow you to work practically. Well, it's in Pisces, but it will allow you to do the necessary steps, even if you're blindly going towards them somehow.
I feel also that we might feel that we have got a really good plug me in. We've got a really good skill set. We've got a really good vision. However, we might find that one of the things isn't our vocational aptitudes to make the success that we foresee. However, as you say, like we're bumping into people or people are drawn to us, and they might not have the vision that we've got, but they've got the constructive ability to help us bring that vision into manifestation. So together we can actually thrive, but apart, we're not doing as much as we could do. So this is a real powerful time of us meeting these people that can come together and support each other and build a house of cards in the community.
Hope not cards, a house of bricks.
Yes, okay, Taurus sustainable bricks. We don't need it. There's already a house of cards falling over there. We don't need to pay attention to that.
I hate this word sustainable because it's being used a lot by the powers that be now. And when I hear sustainable, I cringe. But it's a very good word, like meaning something long lasting and that is not using everything around us, but it's being used also in the wrong ways sometimes.
Well, this is an interesting thing about sustainability, which I think in our current is very interesting. So when Saturn, when we had all Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius, I was like, this is not put your anchor down energy. You don't necessarily want to invest in a whole lot of land or big bit of territory. But what can you do which offers a, as you say, what's another word for sustainable? It's like, it's a bit like a tumbleweed. So this tumbleweed can make its life wherever it goes. It's thriving in every territory. It can plug itself in here and it can disconnect and it can plug itself in here. I think this is a very good motif for us when we're considering our functioning families and businesses at this time. So we can plug ourselves into this bit of society or geographical land and even not feel that we're rooted to it, because we have got everything rooted to us. We're the bits that can be moved, dispatched, and plotted into any area of the world. I think that's important for us to consider.
Thank you. Is there...
Right, so I share on the screen just a little bit of what this looks like for the academics for 10 minutes or so?
Yes, okay.
Okay, right, let me do that. Okay, so the current sky, obviously, we can dwell on these forever, so I'll try and take it at a certain pace. But as we said, we got this Mars South Node going on today, tomorrow, and the next day. I think it's Thursday. It kind of clears it, and recording this on Tuesday. And we just had the full moon in Mars' sign. I want to bring up something that's very interesting about that. Just a minute. I know we had it, but if we look at that full moon, it was at 6 degrees, and Mars was at 21 degrees of Libra. And that is where we have our new moon solar eclipse. And we remember that Mars rules Aries. And so now there's this process of shedding ideas of the self, perspectives that maybe have been devaluating. We might have squeezed ourselves into a box that was contorting or limiting to our self-expression. So with this waning moon and Mars moving towards the south node, I feel that that's what we're really focusing on. Now, just one eye on Venus here. And Venus is moving into a yod. And we'll be in this yod for the second half of this week. And it's actually where Venus stationed retrograde at 28 degrees. It's spent about 6 weeks in this yod quincunx Neptune and Pluto. When anything goes past 150-degree quincunx to Neptune and Pluto, there's this yod because they're always sextile one another. But this is an interesting development with regards to our vision of what our heart's expression can include into a template that had previously been excluded or not considered. And so this is really, as I said, about vouching for ourselves, about knowing that we can, rather than putting ourselves into diminishing frequencies or circumstances. And so Venus, quincunx, Neptune, and Pluto just before it gets to that shadow. And that's poetry. Because if we look back to Mars, then as Venus comes out of shadow, it is then that Mars makes this cardinal square to Pluto. So that's the story of this week. How can we include in our idea and conception of self our value into the template that had not been included? Mars pushes through this cardinal square of Pluto, and then Pluto stations direct. So that's the poetry of the waning moon as we move towards what will be this new moon solar eclipse. It's a confrontation with self, responsibility to own our value and to incorporate our value into our experiences. That's what I feel. Also, Venus opposite Saturn. It's a bit of a sobering thing. It's like, okay, well, I know what needs to be done, and this is how we're going to do it. And it's taking action on that. It's probably quite a challenging week, I would say, in those ways, but it gets us moving, it gets us progressing, it gets us into functioning in the way that we would like to be, I would say. Have you got any reflections on this, Lada?
No, I'm following your thought. It's poetic. Your sun, as far as I remember, is on your moon at 24 degrees Libra, where is the star Spica. That was the star of the poets. So
thank you.
the way
Yes.
of speaking is beautiful.
Thank you very much. So yeah, like I feel that this is very beautiful in itself because we have Mars as like the finer brushstrokes of what is going on with Pluto. Pluto hardly moves. So when we think, okay, what's this Pluto station about? We look to Mars and we figure out that it had just been square Pluto. It's that it had just been through the south node, and that it's just returning back home to its home territory of Scorpio. And that takes place before the new moon solar eclipse, as we had mentioned, at the very degree Mars was at the time of the full moon in Aries. And this is quite a powerful eclipse, and it's in Venus's sign. And I feel like it's a new moon solar eclipse, so it's new beginnings. But if we look at the aspects that come after, they're very promising. I mean, Mars is trine Saturn, Saturn's still retrograde, so it's like refunctioning the self in collaborations with others type of thing. But as things move open to this cycle, Venus starts to trine Jupiter after the first quarter square kind of thing, or that's taking place. And so there's a lot of beneficial openings, although Jupiter's retrograde, and we're moving towards what will be a full moon in Venus's sign. So the new moon solar eclipse is in Venus's sign, and the full moon will be in Venus's sign. So it's a bit like Venus coming out of shadow. Is that really bringing out how we're able to perceive of our value and how we're not to accept less than that? Now, what's incredibly interesting about this full moon lunar eclipse is that it's taking place on what will be the station direct degree for Jupiter at 5 degrees of Taurus. Jupiter stations direct 2 months after this, almost to the day, at that same degree. But you see, Mars and Mercury make a conjunction just hours after this full moon lunar eclipse in the moon's favorite sign of exaltation. But it's in a 180 opposition, is this Mercury Mars conjunction with Jupiter retrograde in Taurus. I think the moon even joins it. It does. Look at that. 11, 11, 11, 11. That's quite a thing, quite a show off going along here. And so what that means for us could be a lot of direct energy, like Mars and Mercury's, I'm telling you. And so we want to really kind of be quite considerate with our words and expression, maybe take us hold our tongues personally at this point. But in the world, I don't really want to project. There could be all kinds of things going along. There's quite an intense energy there. But the point being, if we just go back, it's actually this Mars-Venus sextile, which closes out in these coming days. They've been traveling together for a while, and it sustains until they both change sign, and then it kind of drops off. It's already very nice. And these current days, that's a 60-degree, well, it's a 59-degree, 61-degree sextile that we've had going on for quite a while. So that drops off. And if I start to move it towards by the week after this eclipse, because I'm not going to go through every transit to this Jupiter sextile, but we can see that Pluto will start to gradually move forward, and its square to the nodes is ceasing. And so we move through this eclipse portal and into the Scorpio season, as with Venus making this last activation here. This is an interesting date to be aware of. October the 30th, Halloween. Venus actually activates 21 degrees of Virgo, which has been getting hammered. Because Mars was at 21 degrees of Virgo on August the 13th, when Venus made its star point at 20 degrees of Leo with the Sun, an 8-year cycle that began then. And then Mercury went on to 21 degrees of Virgo, stationed retrograde. And now we're within a Virgo lunar cycle currently that began at 21 degrees after Mercury's come out of shadow. And so Venus is the very last personal planet to activate this space on the 31st of October as we close out this Venetian Libra lunar cycle. So that's an interesting date to be aware of, as we see that Mars and the Sun traveling together. Mars isn't visible. That's the next interesting thing, because the new moon in Scorpio takes place just at their conjunction point, which means that there's a lot of hype with that Scorpio lunar cycle, which we're going to be moving through. Again, we'll probably know a little bit more about the details of such a thing when we get nearer the time, but it's about 3 or 4 days after that we have the exactitude of the Sun meeting with Mars. But that's a lot of energy to carry, because Mars is opposite Uranus and this new moon's opposite Uranus retrograde. It should be an interesting one for sure. So it is that we have this Mars Sun conjunction here. It's a new synodic cycle for Mars and the Sun. And it takes a while for Mars to reappear the other side. It would be that Mars is vanished now from being seen in the evening, and we will be reappearing in the dawn. But it takes a little bit of time because they move at a very gradual pace at this point. So what's going to be interesting also, which we didn't mention in these transits, is that Chiron and the North Node are starting to meet here, and they're going to draw together while we have the Saturn Jupiter sextile. It's actually the Saturn is stationed direct here. I think it's about the 7th of November here. It's stationed direct. Actually, it was the 3rd. Excuse me. So I knew it was at the beginning. It's at 0 degrees, as I mentioned, which was where Saturn was back in February. And so we can really feel into what we might have been working on back then, that now we're able to do with a greater stronghold, greater sense of authority. And maybe while it's retrograde before then, we might think, I've got a month of Saturn retrograde from today. When Philip and Lada have this conversation, how can I utilize Saturn retrograde? Well, maybe we'll go back to the drawing board of a few things. Maybe we'll go and clear out our garage, which is full of rubbish, so we can fit a new office space in there. Maybe we'll go to the dentist because we know we need to get that done and it hasn't been done. These are great opportunities to utilize the Saturn retrograde so that we're more functional. We've got a greater function about ourselves coming into November, all prepared for what will be a thrust forward into the new year. So as I say, Jupiter's still retrograde, 10 degrees. It's moving back to 5 degrees for another 6 weeks after Saturn stationed direct. But you won't expect to see Saturn moving at all for a little while. Okay, so we have our Mars-Sun conjunction, and we move into that Scorpio lunar cycle. In fact, we're whizzing by. I'm going past the week. And so it's actually that by the time we get to the beginning of December, Jupiter is hardly going to be moving all the way through December into January. It's going to be just got a couple of degrees bandwidth for its maneuvers here. And Venus finally making it to where Mars is now at the end of Libra. And so Mercury's entered its retrograde shadow at the beginning of December. It will be retrograde at the beginning of Capricorn, moving back to the last degrees of Sagittarius. And so this Mercury retrograde, which we have at the beginning of Capricorn, is in harmony with Jupiter. In fact, it's Jupiter retrograde at first, and the Mercury will be retrograde as Jupiter stations, and then they're both direct as we move into January with earthy trines, which is very interesting. But as you see, Saturn's starting to move forward now as we move through December, and Jupiter will be stationed direct here on the 29th of December. And that's that. And so you can see that they already sextile here at the very end of the year, because this is a 63-degree sextile there going on, and Saturn will be the one that's moving more fast. So if we move it forward another week, Jupiter wouldn't have moved. But yet Saturn's moved on to 4 degrees. So we've got like a 61 and a half degree sextile. This is going good the first week of January. We've still got Uranus retrograde here, but all other planets have stationed direct. Mercury did its retrograde station direct at the last decan of Sagittarius. And you see Venus has almost joined this Mars and Mercury and the Sun in Capricorn. I'm going to do this bit by the day. It's super interesting. And so the Sun is catching with Pluto here. And Mars is in its exaltation. Uranus is about to station direct at 19 degrees of Taurus. And we've got this sextile going on. It's going on the middle of January here. And so if I actually choose this by the hour, we see that the Sun makes ingress. Look how close that is. They're both at the Pluto's at 29:59 and the Sun at 29:58, but the Sun leapfrogs Pluto, makes ingress into Aquarius, and it's just a few hours later, less than half a day. I think it's about 6 hours later, Pluto then joins the Sun. So they have their conjunction, which is the most important thing, at 29 degrees of Capricorn, the anaretic culminative degree of Capricorn. So that's what the whole year's cycle, because it's a year cycle with Sun Pluto, is going to be about. But the next time that the Sun and Pluto meet, it will be in Aquarius. So this is the very last Sun Pluto conjunction in our lifetime, taking place in Capricorn on the 21st of December. So that's very interesting for us. And we have this sextile still going on. So this is the profound leaps. But the thing is, Pluto's still in retrograde shadow. It was actually at 0021 that Pluto stationed retrograde. So a week after it goes into Aquarius, Pluto, that's when Uranus, which rules Aquarius, stations direct at the very end of January. And it's just a few days later, as we enter the beginning of February, that Pluto comes out of shadow. And that is when this sextile's going on. And this is very interesting because it was that Saturn and Jupiter met at 0 degrees of Aquarius, which is where Pluto is. So Pluto is activating the Great Conjunction, as well as them being at this crescent phase, if you will, this opening sextile, which holds a lot of promise. But astrology takes us to lead with action. It doesn't just gift things into our lap very often. We have to be the leaders here. We have to be the people who are choosing ourselves here. And I say that with distinction, but not because we're late, not because we're challenged and not good enough, but because we have got this time now to make the most of, so that we can find that we're putting ourselves into the position to manifest our vision into our reality with this energy. And so I'll just bring us forward a couple more weeks, 20 more days, so that we can see everything pile into Aquarius, Mercury joining the Sun and Pluto. We have a new moon in Aquarius there. They will leave as Mars comes in and Venus too. So this is a Mars-Venus synodic cycle, which is closing out And we see that they meet at 7 degrees here within a 6-degree orb to Pluto. And Pluto, as I said, hasn't been in this space for 240 to 48 years, something like this. This is powerful. And look at Saturn and Pluto, still sextile. Let's just see until that orb closes with those guys. I think there's a few more weeks as we move into March. But look, Chiron and the North Node are together at this time. That tells me a lot, I feel. And I would like your opinion as I finish that. It's like this is a time which is very healing for us, but it might be very challenging for us. It might be disconcerting for us. There might be a lot of pressure not to make big moves in the world, but we might be making big moves for ourselves right now, which are very progressive for us. For instance, if there was any pressure not to do the things which we would like to do, then we can find that actually we're the ones that gift ourselves authority and lead ourselves to where we want to be. And that might be challenging other traditional authorities that were already in place that we might have previously listened to, but now we know our value, we know to listen to ourselves. And that's my opinion on that. I'd love your reflection. What do you think about this Chiron North Node conjunction taking place at the same time of all of these progressive transits that can be very forward, that can bring us into a lot of forward momentum? I feel like
Me on the spot.
it's medicine, isn't it? Sometimes the thing is the Chiron, the greatest thing of Chiron is that sometimes something can happen to us where initially feels like it's hurting us or like it's affecting us. But then through the putrefaction of that situation, we bring out the medicine. My example for that is like an apple tree. I'm no gardener, even though I've used a couple of gardening analogies. But an apple tree, sometimes you might get a big old rusty nail and hammer it into the stump of the apple tree because it helps it fermentate and bring out the juices. It makes those apples more sweet, brings the best out of the plant because it's got something rotten been put into it. That's some old trick. So we could say that in a sense with the Chiron energy being affected with the North Node, if there was any external influence or anything apprehending us, sometimes that can bring the best out of us.
I like that analogy a lot. I didn't know that. I have an apple tree going. I don't know.
Well, one more analogy. Sometimes somebody provokes us in a way where we had a past trauma, but actually we learn that we've moved beyond it, or we don't have to put up with that anymore, or we stand up for ourselves in a way that maybe we hadn't done before because we know that we're good enough, and we certainly ain't going to put up with that.
I like that. Thank you so much, Philip. That was a really awesome in-depth insight into the next 6 months, pretty much. The next the next half year with this beautiful emphasis on the Saturn-Jupiter sextile, which no matter what else is happening, we're able to integrate the social changes more gracefully and to take advantage of them in some way to grow.
Yeah, I'm really excited because a lot of us have been talking and had our contributions and our visions, and this is our time, and this is where we're here to be. We chose ourselves, we chose this time frame, and this is what we're here to do: just show up and be ourselves and contribute our heart's vision, our excitement, and our joy. And I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Beautiful. That's the opening sextile, because the second part of 2024, we're going to have the opening square. That will be another matter.
Yeah, so, and these are funny.
Make good foundations now, stable, so they can stand the test of the square after that.
It's the square of being a challenge, and how does we work these things in this new world. But the funny thing about that square, well, we'll go too much into it. It happens 3 times. I think the first 2 are in the mutables, and the final one is in cardinals. And so again, there's this process, wax on, wax off, and I'm sure we'll be there all the way through it as well.
I can't wait to discuss the square when it comes, because we can see even the problems that will be global around that time. Well, every time I've seen a square between Saturn and Jupiter in mutable signs, it's borders, something to do with borders. First, 7 years ago, it was in Europe when when the immigrants from the wars and from Africa started coming, and now we're seeing it in America, in Europe as well. So when the square comes, probably this will escalate and some concrete steps will have to be taken. Well, probably
Super interesting.
so is allowing this process to happen more easily now somehow.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if borders and countries and the idea and integration, more so that corporations are equal to countries, seeing more of this and how we are corporations as well as individuals. We can consider that we're able to see that our boundaries are over those of a country. I think that's a very interesting thought to consider.
That's a great way to look at it. Thank you so much, Philip. If anyone would like a personal reading with Philip, he has a lovely discount. I'm putting a link below in the description and in the cards. You can contact him either for 30 minutes discussion of one live topic, or more in depth, the whole horoscope for an hour and a bit over, I guess. So as you can see,
that includes obviously the full
orator.
transit reports, anything like that, but also your synastry readings and secondary progress charts as well, which I specialize in. So anything like that, let us know. I'm here to serve you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. May you all take advantage of the beautiful flowering Jupiter-Saturn sextile that's happening.
Thank you so much, Lada.